Clerk's Tale, Part 2. Not far from where the noble palace stood, in which the Marquis set about his wedding, there was a pretty village near a wood, where the poor folk, each in his little steading, tended their animals with food and bedding, and took what sustenance they could from toil, according to the bounty of the soil. Among these poor folk there dwelt a man, who was esteemed the poorest of them all. Yet there are times when God in heaven can send grace into a little ox's stall. Janicola the village used to call this poor old man. His daughter was a pearl. Griselda was the name of this young girl. But in the virtuous beauty of her heart she was among the loveliest man could ask. For being poorly bred, no sensual part had learnt to use her beauty as a mask. More often from the well than from the cask, she drank, and loving virtue sought to please by honest labor, not by idle ease. And though as yet a girl of tender age, yet in the breast of her virginity there was a ripeness serious and sage. With fostering love and reverent constancy, her poor old father in his poverty she tended, spun her wheel, and watched his sheep at pasture, never idle save asleep. When she came homeward, she would often bring roots, herbs, and other grasses to the croft. These she would shred and sieve for flavoring, then make her bed that was in nothing soft. And thus she kept her father's heart aloft, with all the obedience, all the diligence, by which a child can show her reverence. Griselda, though, among his poorest creatures, Walter had often seen, riding by, hunting perhaps, a something in her features caught his regard, not that he sought to try. The frivolous glance of wantonness, his eye fell on her with a serious awareness, and he would often ponder on her fairness. Her womanliness was what his heart commended. Her goodness, too, far passing the condition of one so young, was beautifully blended. In looks and deeds a vulgar intuition lacks insight into virtue. His position taught him to recognize it and decide, were he to marry, she should be his bride. The day appointed for his wedding came, but no one knew what woman it should be. In wonder at which his people would exclaim, talking among themselves in privacy, "When will the Marquis quit his vanity and take a wife? Alas, to see him thus! Why does he fool himself and us?" Nevertheless, the Marquis bade prepare brooches and rings, all for Griselda, lit with jewels, gold, and lapis. He took care her wedding garment should be made to fit, but by another girl they measured it, who was of equal stature. Gems were sewn on it to grace a wedding like his own. And as the morning opened on the day appointed when the wedding was to be, they decked the palace out in full array, the hall, the chambers, each in its degree, the store-rooms bulging with a quantity of delicate viands, held in plenteous strength, Italy's best from all its breadth and length. The royal Marquis, in his richest dress, with lords and ladies in a company, invited to the banquet, and no less his household officers and soldiery rode off with many a sound of minstrelsy toward the little throp I spoke about, and by the shortest road and sumptuous route. How could the innocent Griselda tell that all this pomp was levelled at her head? She had gone off for water to the well, and having drawn it home she quickly sped, for she had heard the Marquis was to wed. She knew it was the day, and hoped she might be present as he passed, and see the sight. She thought, "I'll stand among the other girls, my own companions, by our door, and see the Marchioness, the Marquis, and his earls. I'll hurry home as quickly as can be, and finish off the work that's there for me, so that I can have leisure then to wait, and watch her riding to the castle gate." She reached the threshold with her water-pot, and as she did the Marquis called her name. She, putting down her vessel on the spot beside the cattle-stall, returned and came before him, falling on her knees. The same serious-looking girl, she knelt quite still, and waited quietly to hear his will. The thoughtful Marquis, speaking with an air of sober gravity, said thus to her, "Tell me, Griselda, is your father there?" In all humility, without demur, she answered, "He is here and ready, sir." She rose at once, and of her own accord fetched out her father to his overlord. He took the poor old fellow by the hand, leading him off to speak with him apart. "Janicula, I can no more withstand, no, nor conceal, the pleasures of my heart. If you consent, accepting from the start whatever follows, I will take to wife your daughter, and will love her all my life. You love me, as I know, and will obey, being my liege man born, and faithful too. Whatever pleases me, I dare say, may well succeed in also pleasing you. Yet on this point I specifically pursue. Tell me, I beg you, can my purpose draw consent to take me for your son-in-law?" Wholly astounded at the news he heard, the old man turned deep red and stood there quaking. He so troubled he could hardly say a word except, "My lord, my will is in your making. What you desire is in any undertaking. Let me not hinder. I am bound to do, my dear master, what best pleases you." The Marquis answered softly, "None the less, in your own cottage, you and I and she must have a conference. Why, you cannot guess? I have to ask her if she will marry. I have to ask if her will maybe to marry and submit herself to me. This must be done. Well, you are by to hear. I will not speak unless I have you near." Well, they were in the chamber, and about the treaty which you presently shall hear, the throng pressed round their dwelling place without, and wondered at the decency and cheer. How well she tended on her father dear, but she, Griselda, might wonder even more, for such a sight she'd never seen before. Nor is it strange Griselda was astounded to see so great a guest in such a place. She was not used to being so surrounded by noble visions. How pale her face! But let me keep my story up to pace. These are the words in which her lord conveyed his will to this benign, true-hearted maid. "Griselda, I would have you understand, as pleasing to your father and to me, that I should marry you, and here is my hand. If, as I may conjecture, you agree, but I would rather ask you first," said he, "since all is done in such a hasty way, will you consent, or pause before you say? I warn you to be ready to obey my lightest whim, and pleasure you must show a willing heart, ungrudging night and day, whether I please to offer joy or woe. When I say yes, you shall never say no, either by word or frowning in defiance. Swear this, and I will swear to our alliance." In wonder at these words, quaking from dread, she answered, "Lord, unworthy though I be of so much honor, so unmerited, if it seems good to you, it is to me, and here I promise, never willingly to disobey in deed or thought or breath, though I should die, and yet I fear my death." "That is enough, Griselda mine," said he, and left the chamber then with sober tread, and reached the door, and after him came she. And to the throng of people there he said, "Here stands the wife. It is my choice to wed. Give her your reverence and love, I pray. Whoever loves me, there is no more to say." And that she might not take the smallest bit of her old gear into his house, he bade his woman strip her there, and I admit those ladies of the court were scarcely glad to touch the rags in which the girl was clad. Yet the bright beauty of her natural glow was clothed anew at last from top to toe. They combed her hair that fell but rudely tressed with slender hands, as if preparatory to coronation, and a crown was pressed upon her head with gems of changeful glory. Why should I let her raiment stay my story? She stood transfigured in her gorgeous dress, scarce recognizable for loveliness. The Marquis then espoused her with a ring, brought for the purpose. On a horse he set her. It was a nobly pacing snow-white thing, and to the palace next with those that met her, leading the way with joyful heart, he let her be brought in triumph, and the day had end in revel, till they saw the sun descend. Shortly, to let my story quicken pace, I say this young new Marchioness so stood in favour with the Lord and heaven's grace, it could not seem by any likelihood that she was born and bred in servitude in a cottage or an oxen stall, but rather nourished in an emperor's hall. To all that looked on her she grew so dear, so much to be revered, where she was born. Those who had watched her childhood year by year could hardly credit it, and dared have sworn that she had never laboured in the corn, nor was Janicula's child, for by her feature fancy would think she was some other creature, virtuous ever, as had long been known. She had increased to such an excellence of grace. She was bounty on a throne. Wise and so lovely in her eloquence, so grave and so benign, she charmed the sense, and gathered every heart in her embrace. They loved her, all that looked upon her face. Nor only was Griselda thus renowned within Saluzzo, for her bounteous name was published forth in all the region round. If one said well, another said the same. Indeed, her goodness had so wide a fame, men, women too, the younger and the older, went to Saluzzo only to behold her. And thus, in humble, nay, in royal kind, Walter espoused a love as fortunate as it was fair. God's peace was in his mind, and he enjoyed the outward gifts of fate, and in that he had seen in low estate the hideous grace men held him in, to have been a prudent man, and that is seldom seen. Nor was it only that by natural wit she could accomplish all a woman should, in homely ways, for, were there call for it, she also could advance the public good. There was no rancor, no discordant mood, in all that country that she could not ease, or use her grace and wisdom to appease. She, in her husband's absence, did not cease her labours. If the nobles of the land fell into enmity, she made their peace. So wise and ripe the words at her command, her heart so equitable, and her hands so just, they thought that heaven had sent her down to right all wrongs and protect the town. And it was not long after, to her joy, Griselda bore a daughter, fine and fair. And though she would have rather borne a boy, Walter was glad, and so his people were. For though it was a girl, perchance an heir might yet be born to them, and likely so, seeing she was not barren, time would show.